Welcome to Cambodia Business Week. Another special Saturday show for you today. Today we have a very special guest again. I'd like to welcome you, Mr. JMenon from the Asian Development Bank.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, Jayan. I call you Jay, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Your role at the Asian Development Bank is lead economist, trade and regional cooperation.
Right.
Okay.
It's a mouthful.
Did I get it right?
Yes, you did.
There's a little bit more here, but we'll.
No, that's enough. Yeah.
Okay. First, if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure.
Where are you originally from?
Okay, right. Personal stuff. Right.
Personal stuff first.
Okay, let's start with that.
We got to get familiar with you. We got to get comfortable with you.
Okay, sure. This is easy for me. Yeah, okay, so I'm Malaysian by birth. Grew up there until I was about 16, 17 maybe, yeah. And then went to finish my high school in Australia.
Australia?
Yes, that's right.
So you have a very British accent.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's a combination of things, I think. I was in Melbourne in Australia, but the Melbourne accent's a bit more, a bit less twangy than the other parts of Australia, maybe, yeah. Anyway, so I finished my boarding school and university in Melbourne. Yep, did all my studies there and worked there as well. So my first job was also in Melbourne. At Monash University in a research center.
Can I ask you what you studied at school?
Oh, right. I did economics, basically.
What made you want to be an economist?
Oh, wow. Okay. Actually, I started my first degree doing accounting and economics, right? Thinking, accounting will give me a career if I would stop there. And I found accounting extremely boring.
I have an accounting degree.
Oh, I apologize to you and to all other accountants who might be out there or studying accounting. It was not my thing. That's what I'm sure others get a lot of joy out of it, but it wasn't for me. And I decided to go on to further study as well. And I was interested in development issues. And economics provided that opportunity, not accounting. And I worked on trade issues as well, which affects a lot of developing countries. My PhD was on trade-related issues of that sort. And then I went to work in a research center at Monash. And while I was there, initially I did a lot more technical stuff, large-scale economic modeling and the like. But because we were a research center, we also did a lot of consultancies to earn our income to pay our salaries. We didn't get much funding from the university because we weren't doing much teaching. We were a research center. And so I started doing consultancies for the UN and ADB and so on. And I did my first project was outside Australia, was on Laos, and then on Cambodia. And I really enjoyed it.
What year was that?
Oh, this was 1996.
Okay.
Yeah, a long time back, yeah. Very different Phnom Penh compared to today. Good and bad.
Sure. I came from the airport today with traffic,
Right.
which I've never seen in Phnom Penh in the whole 10 years I've been here. It's just getting
That's
incredible.
one of the bads. Yeah, in fact, I think
Yeah.
that's the main bad, actually. That's changed since 97. But, of course, a lot better restaurants and a lot more facilities now than then. Yeah. But I miss the old Phnom Penh, I must say. I was quaint and very, almost unique, actually. Yeah. I mean, especially coming from Melbourne, right, to this little sleepy town.
So 1996 was the first time you
Yes,
actually, okay.
I came here.
And that was during the UNTAC days, I guess, right?
Actually, the first time I was supposed to land in Phnom Penh Airport, I was in Laos. It's a joint project of Cambodia and Laos. I'd just been running along the Mekong River, and I came back to my hotel room, turned on the TV, CNN, and I saw Ponchen Tong Airport on fire. And I was supposed to catch a flight in 3 hours, landing in that airport. That was when the split had just taken place between CPP and Phun Simpek, yeah, and the fighting had broken out. And of course, I had to cancel everything, go back to Melbourne. I couldn't visit Cambodia for the first time. But a few months later, I came back to start the project I was supposed to have started. on Cambodia's impact on Cambodia of joining ASEAN at that time.
We'll get to that in a minute. I'd
Okay.
like to. As I mentioned to you before, I was a banker,
Right.
and I guess I still am to some degree. But these people understanding what development banks actually do. I think some people are confused what that actually is.
Sure.
So it's different than a commercial bank, obviously, or
Right.
here a specialized bank or an MFI. So can you explain to the audience what is a development bank, or what does Asia Development Bank do?
Sure. Okay, the question I usually get asked when I first tell someone I work for a bank, ADB, they say, "Oh, can I open an account there?" I said, "You can if you're a country."
Right.
Okay,
Exactly.
so our clients are countries, basically, by and large, right?
And they're also the stakeholders.
They're the owners,
They're the owners.
Right.
So countries participate by
Exactly.
they fund the Asian Development Bank.
right? So we've got our donor countries and borrowing countries. They're all contributors as well, and they have shareholdings. They're all owners, but some only provide funding. They don't borrow. These are the richer countries, right? And the others have an ownership, but they're net borrowers. Of course, they borrow, and they also we have both concessional lending, commercial rate lending, but even the commercial rate lending is on pretty good terms because ADB is a AAA rated agency, and we pass on those benefits in terms of lower interest rates to our member countries, many of which don't have that high rating.
So countries are shareholders, and
Yes.
some countries are contributors in terms of the funding.
Yeah.
What is the benefit first of being a contributor?
Okay. The benefit, I guess, is playing your role in helping poor countries develop, right? It's part of their aid program.
So sort of, is it a philanthropy role in a way?
It is. It is aid. It's aid, right?
It's aid,
yeah,
right.
yeah. But if you believe that the world is made a better place and your own economic prospects depends on other countries also developing, then it's more than just aid. You're also helping world economic growth, and if you're a big rich country like the U.S. or Japan and so on, you need the rest of the world to develop as well to sustain your own living standards.
Now, is this a pool lending, or is it country to country still, with the intermediation of the Asian Development Bank?
Right. Okay. So we receive funds from all of these countries, and we then, design projects and then fund those projects. Right. Like I said, a lot of it is lending. Some of it are in the form of grants. Right.
So it's grant also.
Grant also. Yeah,
Right.
they are gifts for the poorest of our countries. Yeah, that's right. But even those poorest countries will borrow for things like, say, infrastructure, right? But if it's a pure social sector thing, right, health, education, and so on, some of those might be concessional, some of those might be pure grants.
And the determination of whether they're grants or concessional is by there's a
By
governing
country,
board.
usually. By country, yes, that's right. Some countries are eligible, some are not, depending on a set of criteria, the most important being, their per capita incomes. Yeah.
So grants are one thing, but there's also, as you said, borrowing at very special rates.
Sure.
So what types of projects would be funded by
Right.
the ADB?
Okay, so we do a wide range of projects covering almost all development sectors, agriculture, health, education, but we do a lot of work in infrastructure, right? Asia has a huge infrastructure deficit, and we are working towards filling the huge gap there in many countries. And when I say infrastructure, I don't mean just roads. It includes all forms of connectivity.
Talking about airports,
Ports,
bridges,
electricity grids,
right.
the whole lot. Yes, that's right. Yeah, so it's all encompassing infrastructure.
So if I may ask, where's the money coming from and where's it going to?
Okay, so the money is coming from our mainly donor countries.
Which
yes.
is the sort of China's of the world, I guess.
Okay, so our biggest shareholders, equal biggest shareholders, are the U.S. and Japan, right? And they contribute the most, right? But Japan actually contributes a bit more in non-shareholding funds. Yeah. So if you like, the largest amount of money comes from Japan, but they're equal shareholders with the U.S., and they are our biggest donors.
Now, the Trumpism is sort of hitting, saying that why are we doing these things?
It hasn't reached us
and that's surprising.
yet, which is
that's surprising because
good.
he's with this America First policy, right? So,
right.
So it's I guess it hasn't affected the development banks.
No, it hasn't.
That's great news to hear. That's
right.
really good news to hear. Hopefully, another 3 years from now, we'll have to worry about it. I said that, by the way.
Yeah, you might say that. I can't comment.
Right.
Yes,
So the U.S. is still a big partner in this, and Japan, as you said. And where's most of the money going to?
Okay, a lot of our money goes to some of the biggest borrowers, right? India, Indonesia.
Indonesia.
Indonesia, yeah. Indonesia's
which is now, I think, one of the 6th largest economy in the world. So they wouldn't be considered.
They have a huge population,
Right.
a lot of whom are very poor, right?
Right.
In very remote regions. Right. Yes, that's
so
right.
So for infrastructure, this is like a country like with 17,000 islands. Would be
exactly.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people still below the poverty line or just above the poverty line, lacking a lot of public services and essential facilities, health,
education.
Exactly.
And health and education is the other core sort of tenets, I guess, of what you support, right?
That's right. But depends. I mean, it's not just about the money, of course, right? Like a lot of the things that we do is in the form of technical assistance, right? So, for instance, China is a borrower, right? China's got the world's largest pool of savings. So why are they borrowing from us, right? They're actually funding the U.S. Deficit in a large extent, right, through their purchase of U.S. Treasury bills.
Sure.
So why are they borrowing? Well, we provide a package of services and not just finance, right? So it comes with technical expertise and various other capacity building activities that are tied into the overall project. So that's why we have, so-called surplus countries also looking to borrow because of the extras that come with the borrowing.
And does the ADB borrow itself besides from countries?
Yes.
So
We
you
go
issue
out there.
bonds.
We have to also
Euro
raise
bonds,
our
one
own
of our-
financing.
right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. That's right.
And
that's right.
you're raising funds for eventual grants and for eventual loans that will be repaid back, and then you repay.
Exactly. That's right. So there is a Treasury Department that manages, our overall portfolio. We can't just rely on the contributions, nor should we. That would limit our operations in a significant way, to be able to leverage, the lending that we do.
And you
we
do
go out to the market.
And you said you were AAA rated because
We are AAA rated, and everyone gets our lower interest rate cost. We are non-profit, right? So everything is passed on. You can imagine, poor countries, some of them are below investment grade. If they were to borrow, they'll be borrowing, a multiple of the costs that we can borrow at. They get that benefit passed on through to them by borrowing from us.
And what are some of the current projects that you are funding or either grant or by lending that are pretty sizable and important projects in the Asian region?
Oh my God, that's a very long list, right?
What's the ones you like? No, I mean, what are some of the bigger ones?
Given this region, I
Right.
think a big program that people might be familiar with is our so-called GMS program, Greater Mekong Sub-Region.
Right.
So ADB has a big focus on regional cooperation, sub-regional programs, so bringing countries together, right? So, these huge road networks, running from Myanmar to Vietnam, through Laos and Cambodia, running north from China through to the south of Cambodia, the east-west, north-south economic corridors. These are, multi-country, multi-year lending programs that have created incredible connectivity in this region.
And this is very important for trade between these countries.
Absolutely,
yes.
yes.
And people don't realize just how important it is.
For sure. And also it's multimodal transport. This is not just roads, but we have ports, airports that they link up to, which facilitates trade in goods and services increasingly. Yeah.
And what about Cambodia? What are some of the interesting projects that are going on in Cambodia?
Oh, in Cambodia we have a diverse program. You should get one of our staff from our resident office to give you more details. But we cover, education, health, the key social sectors, as well as infrastructure. A lot of road development as well.
So Cambodia, I think there's this thought that Cambodia borrows a lot or gets grants from China. China helps develop the country.
Right.
But Cambodia is a borrower from the Asian Development Bank.
Yeah, the ADB is the largest multilateral operating in Cambodia. We're bigger than the World Bank or the UN in terms of our lending and grant and technical assistance activities. So we have been the largest also for a very long time. And so Cambodia is very important to ADB, and we hope ADB is also important to Cambodia.
So you've seen dramatic changes in Cambodia from 1996 onwards.
Sure.
And I guess what surprises me as being here 10 years is the acceleration of those changes over the last 24 months.
Sure.
Being here 10 years, maybe the first 8 years wasn't developing as fast, but
right.
It's the incredible pace of development in Cambodia, which is sort of reminds me of the days when we talked about tiger economies being like Singapore, Indonesia,
right.
Malaysia. So this
Sure.
is sort of like the second wave, I guess, or even the third wave of
right.
what the smaller tiger economies.
Sure.
What is attracting people to Cambodia?
Okay, let me just step back a bit and pick up on your tiger economy reference, right? Yeah, you mentioned, a few of the examples. When I first came here, the Cambodia then, from 96, and reading its history, and looking at what's happened now over this period, I think the Cambodian economy is a true Asian miracle, right? If you look at it in terms of change in percentage terms, it has gone from almost nothing, right, where the Khmer Rouge destroyed almost all institutions, right, and look at where it is today. I don't think we've seen this anywhere else in Asia, in this dramatic transformation. So I think, that's something that probably isn't recognized often enough. There's been a remarkable change, right, in the economic condition over a relatively short period of time, right? And even if you compare it with the so-called, failed states or, war-stricken nations around the world, I think Cambodia comes out almost the star, if not the star, in terms of how well it's managed its transformation, starting from so little, ending up where it is today, yeah. And it's true, I mean, growth over the recent period has accelerated, right?
Shockingly, I would say.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just,
right. Yes.
The last 24 months has just been absolutely amazing.
Right. And maybe, there's, concern about sustainability as well. And of course, as Cambodia graduates to upper middle income status, the average growth rate will taper down. That's what we see. And some people refer to it as a middle income trap. Call it whatever you want, but growth will slow. It's easy to grow fast when you're small and poor, right? Yeah. You got a bit of capital added to a lot of labor, becomes very productive, right? But that changes over time, right? Yeah. It can't go on forever, and it doesn't need to go on forever. Yeah.
And I think it's amazing how the dialogue is now. It's sort of been Phnom Penh, Siem Reap, and now we're really talking about the outer cities. We're talking about Battambang, and we're talking about Mandalkiri.
Yeah.
I mean, is this getting too ambitious?
No, I think it's the right way to go, right? Yeah. I mean, you can see that Phnom Penh itself, right, is now struggling to sustain this massive development.
We hope it doesn't become another Manila or another Jakarta. I mean, we just get spread out forever. I mean,
Well,
this
exactly.
would be,
That's right. That's right. So the way to do it is to move it out.
right.
We move it out to different city centers. Oh, another Bangkok, right? Yeah, as
Right,
well.
yeah, I mean, those places go on forever.
Yes, that's right. And there's congestion, there's rising costs, right? Yeah. So if you have the good connectivity within the country working effectively, not everyone has to be in the main city, right? I think most of productive activity will still take place, or increasingly take place, in cities, in urban centers, but you need more of them, not expand the size of existing cities, but expand the number of cities where these activities take place.
And I think there's some economic challenges. At least being in business here 10 years.
Right.
What some of the things that concern me is whether there's a sufficient capacity in the labor force, because you're seeing such growth in the country.
Yeah.
And you're seeing then such demand for labor.
Yeah.
You're seeing wage inflation.
Right.
All right. So and Cambodia has been always attractive to foreigners.
Sure.
But it's still like you say, there's still that stigma of the old Khmer Rouge. So when you talk to people that don't really know Cambodia,
Right.
then they say, "Isn't that
Yeah.
it happened 40 years ago?" But
Right. But they still have that striking image, which
Right.
is hard to shed, right? Yeah. And that is a bit of a curse of history here. But I think the point you make about the need to focus on education and skills development is critical
So
in
we
this
still
country.
have 79% of the population is rural,
Right, exactly.
and there's great
Yeah.
demand in the cities for labor.
Sure, sure.
And you know, when you've seen your Thailand experience and
Right.
your Indonesian experience, there's a migration of labor
Exactly, yes.
out of the countryside into the cities.
Absolutely, and that will continue. I mean, when I went to the Phnom Penh Special Economic Zone to do a study and interviewed firms, a lot of them, Japanese firms that are paying quite well compared to, say, alternative forms like garment factories, they admitted that they are forced to go out into the provinces now to recruit, right? Anyone in Phnom Penh who wants a job in one of the factories can get one, and they have to go out now, and have to go out further and further into the rural sector to look for workers. That's a good sign.
Yes,
Yeah,
really
that
good.
means people who want to work in these factories can find work, and wage inflation here is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it has to be moderated and as much as possible linked to productivity. But what's development if people don't have better living conditions?
Sure.
Yeah, they need to earn more money to have better lives.
But there's also another trend that is a little worrisome is people leaving Cambodia to work in Korea, Taiwan to get
Sure.
also to get better wages.
Yes, that's right. This
So-
is happening in Philippines, of
and-
course,
right.
yeah, in a big scale. And you can see why they have better incomes, right? But long term, of course, exporting your most precious resource, which is your human capital, is not the way to go forward, not the way to develop, right? It can be an interim measure. Remittances can help in improving livelihoods, but it's not the long-term solution. So you've got to create the conditions to make them want to stay at home, work here, and contribute to development of Cambodia.
And we're very fortunate to have you here today. So I wanted to mention that you've obviously published some papers that are of great interest. So in the little time we have remaining, can we touch upon some of the published papers that you've done? One is
Sure.
dollarization.
Right.
Now Cambodia is a dollarized economy, and the NBC has been ambitiously talking up the possibility of gradually and progressively going to the real.
Sure.
How realistic is this in the short term and medium term?
Right. This is one of my pet topics. Sometimes, my views may not be fully appreciated by the NBC. They are the central bank. They have to be gung-ho about de-dollarizing. I can understand that. But I think there's no major disagreement, really. I see dollarization here as a symptom, not the problem, right? So addressing a symptom is not the right way to go about solving it, right? Dollarization is a symptom of all the other constraints that Cambodia faces as a transitional economy. And those constraints are becoming less binding. A lot of them are being addressed rapidly. And when they are addressed, you won't have to try and de-dollarize. It will happen naturally. People would prefer to use local currency.
Is there really a reason to de-dollarize? Is Cambodia need to do it? I mean, it's been one of the, I guess, the steady pegs.
Yeah.
One of the steady pillars of the economy
Sure.
is the fact that they are dollarized.
Right.
And
Dollarization, in my view, as you correctly say, I think, worked well for Cambodia, right? It's kept inflation intact. It's been a boon for foreign investors. They've seen this as a sign of stability of the value of their investments and the ability to, repatriate at a given exchange rate, which is one, right, dollar to dollar. So they haven't had to worry about volatile exchange rates.
I've just come from probably what's one of the worst examples.
Right.
I was just in Kazakhstan, and
Right.
their currency, I guess, devalued like 2 or 3 times over the last.
Sure.
This is a very wealthy country in terms
Right.
of resources and
Yeah.
oil and gas, and it's really had such a severe impact.
Sure.
And it's a rich country.
Yeah,
So, in a sense, dollarization, if you look at what's happened with some of these other developing economies,
right.
I mean, Indonesia, the rupiah is went from 8,009 to 13,500.
Right.
The Malaysian ringgits, I mean,
Yeah.
Cambodia's probably stood out as because of being dollarized.
Yeah. It has benefits and it has costs, right?
Right.
So yeah, okay. My view is that in Cambodia, in the long run, as long as they don't try and enforce de-dollarization, right? Try to fix the problem by legislating it. As long as they don't do that, if it happens naturally, then Cambodia will be better off having its own currency. The central banks can earn seigniorage. And if they're disciplined about their printing presses and don't go, financing huge deficits by printing money, only the U.S. can do that and get away with it because of the central reserve role of the U.S. dollar. Cambodia won't be able to get away with it, and I think the central bank has shown enough discipline so far anyway, and will show that kind of discipline, so they'll be better off. The exchange rate can be an important price. Left the vagaries of the international market, it can sometimes go through volatile phases, but usually it reflects underlying sort of imbalances that need to be addressed, right? The exchange rate is easier way of adjusting to shocks than the alternative, which is prices or wages, right? Wages is the costly way of adjusting to external shocks. Exchange rate is the faster, less painful way to adjust to shocks.
Last topic to touch on is Vision 2050.
Right.
And I'll let you tell us what that is.
Okay.
Because
Right.
that's assuming 32 years from now.
Yes, will we be around? Yeah, I don't think
Not
I
me,
will.
but you
Yeah.
maybe.
No. I think. I worked with the government, helped the government formulate their Vision 2030 a few years ago, which was the graduation from LDC, least developed country status, to upper middle income status by 2030. This is the next stage, moving from upper middle income to advanced country status or high income country status. And this is very early days of formulating the strategy. Again, this is the Cambodian strategy, not mine, not ADB's, not anyone else's. This is their aspiration. We are here to help them any way we can to formulate it by providing technical inputs.
What would be the most interesting thing if we were alive 2050 that would have been achieved with this vision?
Okay. Well, maybe Cambodia won't be dollarized. That's probably not the most exciting. But I think if Cambodia can, eliminate poverty, right? many rich
which has
countries.
been very successful.
It has so far,
yeah,
exactly.
It really has.
But there's still lots of people that are just above the threshold, right? And so the not to underplay the tremendous success in poverty reduction, I think there are still a lot of vulnerable workers and vulnerable people that hover close to the poverty line. So, again, a bad monsoon or, any kind of shock can push them below the poverty line.
With climate change, you'd have to
And
worry
climate
about
change is
droughts
exactly,
and so forth.
that's right. And the point I was trying to make is that, there are many advanced or high-income rich countries that have a lot of poor people, right? Yeah, the U.S. is probably one of the better examples, I'm afraid. But so if Cambodia can reach advanced country status, high-income status, while preserving a society that has limited amount of inequality, right? Inequality is always going to be there. As long as it's not got huge gaps between the rich and the poor, and people have access to all the basic services that they need, education, health, and etc. And, they have a living condition that is also fulfilling, right? Which is beyond just the pure material or economic aspects. Environment that's livable, cities that are livable and functional, congestion that's under control. And I think what's important for Cambodia is also international recognition of their equal footing in the world stage. And that's what I think they aspire to. And they often talk about reclaiming their dignity, given their tragic history.
Sure.
And I think that's all part of the unique circumstance of Cambodia, given its history. And for them, this is an aspiration that's multidimensional and, I think achievable at this stage. But there are lots of unknowns.
Considering the progress, like we said, the last 24 months,
Right.
2050 is probably being too negative, I would say. It's probably something that could be achieved in the next 10 to 15 years.
Well, I'm sure the government would be very happy to hear you say that to them, and I hope you're right. But also, I guess the thing is, as you get richer, you cannot expect to grow that fast. A 3% growth rate is sometimes considered very good. Yeah, U.S.
And
is
we're
aiming
doing
for
it 7, but
yeah, that won't go on forever.
well, I think that there's probably a lot of untapped pillars. We don't agriculture for sure has not been the success story that it can be.
Sure.
As such as it has been in Thailand, and
Right.
there's a lot of potential here for really getting agriculture finally
Sure.
blasting off.
That's right. It's still the backbone of the economy.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you hopefully there is some oil and gas laying around, but who knows?
Okay. Now that could help, or there could be a curse, but
Right.
yeah. But I think the transformation of the economy, diversifying the economy, is key right now, and we're seeing the early signs of that with manufacturing taking place in the special economic zones, with plugging into this global value chains and production networks, and that's where I think the future
If you could
lies.
extend what's that success story in Thailand and the Southern
Right.
Basin, it could be here as well.
Absolutely,
That would be fantastic.
exactly. That's right. I mean, this is what they call the flying geese model. I mean, as wages rise in one region, then if the conditions are right in the next country, then they will come. Right.
And that's why infrastructure is so important.
Absolutely,
Well,
absolutely.
I want to thank you for coming on. It was a
Thank you, Anthony.
tremendously valuable conversation. I'm
I've
sure my
enjoyed
viewers
it.
learned a lot.
I enjoyed it
And
too. Yeah.
I hope to have you back. Have you back again soon.
I'll be
Thank you
delighted
very
to.
much.
Thank you,
Cheers.
Anthony. Yeah, and